Maria Hatziolis from the World Bank speaking with Sean Dorney in Rarotonga. Last year, for the first time, more people moved to Australia from China than from any other country. Yet some say they're still made to feel like foreigners because of the way they look. Community leaders are determined to address the identity crisis by urging people with Chinese heritage to unite and find a stronger voice. Kate Arnott reports.
Sometimes I do forget that I am Asian and I look Asian, and it's only when people actually react to me that I think, oh, yeah, actually that's right. You know?
Because I've been in Australia for many years now, and I really feel that I'm part of the furniture in a sense.
They've been calling Australia home for most, if not all, of their lives, and some of their families go back generations. But many Chinese Australians say they're still questioned about their identity.
Because my face, straight away, people wouldn't recognize you are Australian. Even you say you are Australian citizen, they still feel you are Chinese.
Linda Dong and her husband left Shanghai in the late 80s to study in Australia. Their parents followed shortly after, and their son William was born in Melbourne in 1989. When he started school, he was the only Chinese Australian there.
Particular people who used to point that out to me, you know, just how I look, and right now that school has Chinese as a second language and accepts a large majority of their students as international students.
Asian immigration has long been a sensitive issue in Australia. In 1901, the White Australia policy restricted the number of non-white immigrants. That policy was progressively dismantled until multiculturalism was introduced in 1972. But in the 80s, the former Prime Minister John Howard, while in opposition, suggested Asian immigration shouldn't increase any further. And 10 years later, Pauline Hanson and her One Nation party sparked major protests across the country with their anti-Asian policies.
I and most Australians want our immigration policy radically reviewed and that of multiculturalism abolished. I believe we are in danger of being swamped by Asians.
But the days of politicians warning against Asian immigration are all but over. And now Chinese Australians want to build a national voice on issues of equality, racism and cultural identity.
The Chinese Australians have been traditionally regarded as being just hard-working but quiet and somehow aloof, maybe not interested, not engaging. On the other hand, also I think the mainstream society needs to realise and accept that we are very much part of Australian mainstream society.
In his book The Chinese Face in Australia, sociologist Chan Kwok Bun explores the lives of Australian-born Chinese known as ABCs. He says ABCs sometimes feel they can't engage with mainstream society, especially if they're subjected to racism or discrimination.
If there is any kind of so-called internal solidarity, it's certainly not a voluntary choice. Okay? It is more a reaction to outside forces, which are not exactly very friendly and are often quite hostile.
Hostilities aside, the Chinese Community Council says Chinese Australians need to step up and unite.
Other ethnic groups, I think, have done really well by organising themselves and speaking out and having at least, if not totally united, at least a very strong voice representing their own communities. And I think we need to do that.
At the Chinese Council's recent national conference in Melbourne, some prominent Chinese Australians shared their experiences. They say participating in the community as a whole can go a long way towards changing the perceptions towards people with Chinese heritage. Paediatrician Dr. John Yoo was Australian of the Year in 1996.
A couple of weeks ago, my next-door neighbour was talking to me over the fence about two families from South Asia, two Indian families who recently moved in. And she said, "The neighbourhood's changing. I don't know if I like it." Then she looked at me and said, "Oh, what a terrible thing to say. That was very insensitive," she said, "but I've never seen you as being Asian. You're just my neighbour."
Dr. Yoo says he shared that anecdote because he wanted to show that he's always been accepted for who he is and his achievements. So has the Lord Mayor of the northern city of Darwin, Katrina Fong Lim.
And I think that we need to take responsibility collectively for the community that we live in, which is the Australian community. And people need to be able to step up and go, look, I want to be a community leader. I want to contribute my time, my talents to this community, which is Australia.
How to be an Australian is a question many people with Chinese heritage grapple with.
To be or feel like an Australian, you don't have to love footy, to drink beer or throwing a barbie at your backyard.
That's certainly true for physiotherapist William Liu, who's heavily involved in ballroom dancing and soccer. He's also very proud of his Chinese heritage.
We do celebrate all the Chinese holidays. Who wouldn't? I think everybody in Australia would like to celebrate everybody's holidays. That's a great thing about Australia. And to live together happily, we all should get into the community and try to get along with each other.